Hi, everybody.
Hello.
Hi. I wanted to thank everybody for being here today. The Keynote is such an important part of what we do at the Tales of the Cocktail Foundation. And this report has been really fun to see come together, but it's also been really challenging. And Eileen gave me this term as we were talking about this that I really, really like, which is constructive disagreement. And been thinking a lot over the past 15 minutes since we talked about it, a little bit about what that means for our community and for our society. And very often we do not have constructive disagreement. And so I think as we're sitting here talking about a paper that, I represent bars and bar ownership, we have very varied views on this. And so I am trying to remember that as we bring up these kind of topics that are hard, that we have to set aside our emotions for a moment and look at it and say, how do we figure out a way to move forward together, whether we agree or disagree? And so I wanted to put that out there before we get going. So the Tales of the Cocktail Foundation acknowledges that working in the hospitality industry is a valuable lifelong career for many. And with this research, we explore labor standards that may allow improvements in the longevity and sustainability of the career. And it's an important thing to talk about. I mean, one of our stated goals is to make this a longer standing, sustainable career. And there are things that exist now that make people want to age out, want to leave this career, and we have to try harder to make this the kind of industry where people can work for a long time. So what began as a response to the pandemic's impact on bars and bartenders evolved into a 3-year research project exploring the hospitality industry's labor landscape. And as part of the study, bartenders and bar owners shared insights on the job's biggest pros and cons, including views on the sub-minimum wage and possible alternatives. So the TOTCF Policy Committee, Government Affairs Manager, and with the support from the Florida International University Chapman School of Hospitality, worked on the project, and it unfolded in 2 phases. First, a survey of bartenders and servers. Second, to ensure that both management and staff perspectives were conducted, there was also bar owners added. Key areas of the study included labor costs and management, job satisfaction and concerns, and perspectives on tipping practices and policies, particularly those surrounding the sub-minimum wage and tipped wage credit. We'll talk through the first 3 research phases of the project today with the teams who have conducted that research. This study acknowledges that there is not a one-size-fits-all approach or solution, but rather informed options to explore fully and a need for dialogue and shared solutions. And just to expand on that a little bit, we just on a personal level, we've tried a lot of different systems at our restaurants and bars. And the challenge is that you want to try as many as you can, but there is a positive and a negative to trying so many systems, and it's tough on the teams. And once you add something and then you change the way people are compensated, it always creates a pretty big ripple. So I think what is really amazing about the study is that we have the opportunity for the first time to really look at the entire cross section of options and try our best to thoughtfully pick one so you're not changing midstream. So we acknowledge there are a variety of valid concerns from operators around raising wages, and a key piece of this research is gathering best practices from operators around the country. So from the research, 6 models emerged. The goal of these models is not to take tips away entirely, but rather explore systems that would make a higher minimum wage more viable in the long run, so that tips make even more of a positive impact for employees as business owners continue on the road towards better guaranteed minimum income. And we all know that creating the best work environment and the most attractive workspace is the best to attract talent. So I think that in this way, employers and employees are completely aligned. From here, the Tales of the Cocktail Foundation acknowledges the need for further research into hospitality labor standards so they can eventually provide more real solutions for supporting small businesses in a variety of states in different scenarios. To begin, the organization has launched a bar professional policy network where resources on healthcare access and benefits, sexual harassment training, and youth worker engagement will be available. The organization is also asking owners, bartenders, servers, industry professionals, major spirits brands, think tanks, legislative bodies, and other hospitality professionals and organizations to also get involved in ways that are large and small. So I'm excited to kick this off and really excited to welcome my friend, the lovely and talented Emma Janzen.
Thanks, Neil. Hi, everybody. Thanks for coming out early. First thing, well, early really is a relative term, I suppose, at Tales. First thing on Monday morning to listen to us talk. I'm Emma Janzen. I am a spirits and cocktail journalist and also a book author. I'm here to basically, I'm not a bartender, right? And I'm not a bar owner. And so the reason why I'm here is because Tales, over the course of the last 3 years, has gathered so much information, right? Data, surveys, interviews, and they needed someone who could maybe help take all of this information. It was like, I don't know, like 100 pages or something, and figure out how to distill it down into something that would be easy to understand. So I took all of this information, spent a few months with it, read all of the interviews, all the quotes, all of the charts and graphs, and distilled it down into about a 2,000-word article. That's going to come out in the fall. And the idea for today is just to kind of give you all a preview of what that's going to look like. Just very kind of top-level information, not getting too deep in the weeds, but hopefully giving y'all enough to understand kind of the genesis of this and the impact that it could have. So we'll start by talking about the broad scope of the project and how it started, and then we'll get into some of the survey results. We'll talk about those models that Neil mentioned, and then we'll have our panelists talk a little bit about what they think is going to come next. So without further ado, I'm going to let these amazing women introduce themselves. Charlotte, you want to start?
Yes. Thank you, Emma. Good morning, everyone. I'm Charlotte Voisey, the Executive Director of the Tales of the Cocktail Foundation as of this year, and really pleased to be up here representing this great work that these women have done, and I'll be speaking from the perspective of the foundation this morning. Thank you. Thanks for coming.
I'm Tammera, Tales of the Cocktail Government Affairs Manager. Well, previously. Now I'm a consultant with my own firm. I do government affairs and lobbying work. I know that's a dangerous word to say in this room, but I lobby full-time. I've handled this project for the past 3 years. Long road, but we're finally here, and we're excited to give this information to you all.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Lisa Cain. I am a professor in the Chaplin School of Hospitality and Tourism Management at Florida International University, and I was the key investigator on this project for the second phase of it, where we interviewed the bar owners and operators. So I'm excited to share our findings with you today.
Awesome. All right, let's get into it. Charlotte, you want to kick us off and tell us a little bit about the impetus for starting this initiative?
Yep, thank you, Emma. So first and foremost, really any opportunity to look into and hopefully improve the well-being of hospitality workers is exactly the kind of work that the Tales of the Cocktail Foundation wants to do and seeks out to do. So that would be the first sort of reason why. The goals of this particular research align perfectly with the mission of the foundation, which is to educate, advance, and support the global drinks industry. So there was an obvious alignment there. And this is really a wonderful example that we're very proud of the year-round work that the foundation does. You all know, myself included for many years, that Tales is that wonderful week in July down in New Orleans. But the truth of the matter is, behind that week, there's a year-round effort, not only to plan for this week, which takes a very long time, but a year-round effort to educate, advance, and support the drinks industry. So this is really indicative of the effort and energy that goes behind that. And before I hand off the mic, I would like to give a shout out to our policy committee for really helping to guide and steer this work. The committees that we put together at Tales of the Cocktail, we include industry members from outside of the organization, so we get those perspectives in. So I know that we have Robin, Alex, Lynette in the room. If you guys want to stand up, give a little wave, and take some credit for the wonderful work that you've done. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Wonderful. Tammera, Neil had mentioned that this project was born out of the pandemic era, right? And seeing all of the challenges that the bar industry went through at that time. Can you walk us through how this project evolved from that moment?
Wow. So, let me sit up for that one. It initially began as a policy plan. So we were discussing how do we implement change for the industry professionals, because so many people were affected by the pandemic. People were losing their jobs. They didn't have health care benefits. Like, there were so many issues across the board. So, of course, the policy committee was like, what can we do? What can we, like, give our insight? How do we raise funds? Like, everybody, it was just all over the place. So with the policy plan, it was designed to sort of implement change on the high level, like Congress. Like, let's go to Congress, let's raise the wages. However, that didn't happen. So it didn't really work out that way, because once we started the deep dive into how to actually implement change, we realized there was no research on bartenders and servers, like none. It's restaurants, workers, but not that subset. Like, it just doesn't exist. So we decided to commission our own research. We designed a 37-question survey. We conducted it across the country, and we divided it into states below $3. I know, $3. As the minimum wage, $3 to $8, which was our mid-range, and above $8. So we were really targeting those individuals that were falling below the line, like barely making it. Like, that was our real focus, and got some great insight there. But we realized we didn't necessarily have everything we needed, because we needed that other side, the owners and operators. So we needed two sides, but we had to get there. So it was a long journey, just the development of it.
And you needed that research because you can't like go to the government and say this needs change without having like some tangible data, right?
Yes, you need that supportive data, quantitative, qualitative. You need it all, because they hear you, but they also need pen to paper. Like, it has to make sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that does make sense. So tell us about, so the first phase was talking to bartenders, right? Mm-hmm. And y'all talked to over 500 across the country. How did you pick who to talk to? And
right. So we talked to everyone. If bar was in your name, we talked to you. So we did back of the house, bartenders, bar servers, bar managers, everyone you could think of. We really wanted to get the whole gamut. Like, what's going on? How do you feel? Because it's one thing to sit in a room and have a conversation about what's going on the outside. So we want to hear, how do you like your job? How do you feel about the labor standards? Do you enjoy working as a bartender? Would you do this forever? Like, do you see yourself in this career long term? And surprisingly, well, not surprisingly to this room, over 96% of the people were, I love this job. I would stay in it forever. However, the pay is inconsistent. There's no stability. It's not sustainable. Like, I want to do it, but it's impossible. I want to see labor standard changes. And that was probably 90% of the people wanted to see labor standard changes.
Understandably so. So in addition to talking to bartenders, y'all also wanted to get the perspective of owners and operators, right? Because everyone has their own different sets of challenges on both sides of that equation. So in order to get like the full picture, you had to talk to both sides, right? Excuse me. So Lisa, can you tell us how y'all chose the owners and operators and what that like kind of pool of people looked like?
Absolutely. So just to kind of echo what everyone has said so far, it's really important to get a holistic understanding of the equation, right? You want all of the stakeholders involved so that you really get a rounded perspective. And so we decided to piggyback off of what they did with the bartenders and all bar servers, people with bar in their name, but with bar owners and operators, people who actually had the power to make financial changes in the organization if they wanted to or could. And so we wanted to get people who were representative of states who could use the tip credit but did not, who could use the tip credit and did, and then those people from states who could not use the tip credit. Now, the tip credit, I don't know if everybody in this room knows exactly what that is, but it allows you to pay a tipped minimum wage instead of the regular minimum wage. And it varies from state to state. So not all states have the same tip credit minimum wage, and not all states allow the use of it. So for example, California, Oregon, and Washington have not allowed the use of the tip credit since 1974. So obviously there are restaurants and bars in California and Washington and Oregon, and they are able to operate successfully. So we just wanted to see what they were doing, what strategies they were employing to remain profitable and also pay their employees, and they use tips. So again, to echo that sentiment, the goal is absolutely not to eliminate tipping practices. It's just to see how we could create a better strategy or multiple strategies that would be transferable across states or implementable across states so that we could figure out how to retain those valuable employees because they want to stay in our industry. They love our industry. This is the best industry. And so how can we retain them? How can we hang on to them for longer? What does that equation look like? And so that's how we chose.
What were some of the top, sorry y'all, I forgot to click. I'm not used to clicking. Bad moderator. So just to go back really quickly, this is some of the data that came through from the bartender surveys. Most people said that they were very happy with their jobs. They consider them career jobs. They didn't have second jobs. And maybe we could backtrack and talk about this just for really quick. More than 8 in 10 of the workers did support increasing the federal minimum wage for tipped workers.
Yes, so I'm trying to see which chart you're looking at. So about the tip wage, and I'm leery about how I say it because you don't want to say sub-minimum wage. Like, we've had such difficult conversations surrounding this tip credit, and the elimination of tip credit was never the focus here. However, raising the wage was the initial go or what we were looking to do. So it came about that the tip credit was a thing. A lot of people did not know about the tip credit. So we spent a lot of time deep diving into how to get rid of it, how it changes across the states. Just a lot of work there on that alone. So what we did realize is that a lot of the workers who were receiving tip credit didn't actually know that they were receiving that tip credit. They just thought that they were receiving that wage. So I guess we just need to do a lot of informing individuals or workers about what's going on with the federal tip wage and how it works across the country. And
Yeah, I mean,
What
just
else?
basic
What was the
education.
last part? What specifically, what was that last part of your question?
No, I think
The
you
last
got it.
part.
It was just the one.
Okay. I just want to make sure I've covered everything.
No, totally. Yeah, so I think back to Lisa. Sorry to backtrack, but back to Lisa. So you're talking to these owners and these operators, and one of the biggest emerging themes out of those conversations was that employers generally did want to pay their staff more, right?
Yes, that was definitely a finding. In fact, it was the only consistent finding we had across all of the interviews, and it was large. It was the majority of the people who responded to the survey as well. Everybody is in favor of paying more. It's just how to do that, right? That's the sticky wicket, right? And just to piggyback off of what Tammera was talking about with the tip credit. So when the tip credit was introduced originally, it represented 50% of what minimum wage actually was. And today, if you pay the federal minimum wage, it only represents 29% of the minimum wage. So it hasn't grown along with cost of living and inflation and everything else that has sort of exacerbated since the pandemic, and even before that. The tip credit hasn't changed since the early 90s, so over 30 years it's been stagnant. And so is that sustainable for our employees, and what can we do to sort of help them to make this a career, right? Because I know I was a bartender at one point in time and I loved it. And everybody I know who has been a bartender absolutely loved what they did. It just wasn't a if they left it, it wasn't a sustainable option for them. And so how can we work toward sustainable employment for our career servers and bartenders?
And a lot of those owners and operators also, they acknowledged that the system is not set up in a way that makes this easy, right? Like, what were some of their, I guess, concerns on that front? Like, why is it not?
Right.
Obviously, everyone would do it if it were easier, right? But give us a picture of that.
So I think part of the reason is because the tip credit is an option, we build our models for how we operate our restaurants with paying a tipped minimum wage rather than a minimum wage, right? Because the restaurant then can receive that stipend from the government that makes up the difference between the tip minimum wage and the federal minimum wage. And what they do with that can go back to the employees, or it can go back to the business to keep it alive. And we know that 95% of bars and restaurants in their first year fail. And so I think this was in part a government effort to try to help new businesses and small businesses survive and thrive. But if the model is paying less than minimum wage, then is that really a sustainable model in the long run? And I think all of our participants would say no. And so we are looking at strategies to try to help change that and provide actual practical measures for you to try and implement in your businesses so that you can move away from using the tip credit and retain those valuable employees, because the cost of turnover is astronomical.
Yeah, speak a little bit more to that. So many of the bar owners who were surveyed, they said it was a moral imperative to take care of their people, right? But there were also benefits to the business as well, right? It's not just taking care of your people. The ripple effects of that are kind of interesting and substantial.
Absolutely. So in addition to having knowledgeable staff, right, it hurts anytime you lose somebody who knows your product and knows your customers and knows what you're all about and is part of your company culture. And then on top of that, you have to sometimes offer a severance package, but the cost of losing somebody can be between 90 and 200% of what they make in a year. Because of those severance packages, because of what it costs to find someone and hire them and then onboard them and train them, and the cost of the mistakes that transpire, and the lost labor in between when that person left and you hired somebody new. So there are so many variables that go into that equation of what it actually costs when somebody leaves your organization, not to mention the shift in the cultural climate of the organization. And so again, it's so important because a loyal and happy employee translates to loyal and happy customers and repeat customers and a successful business, right? So the goal is sustainable employment, and that's really what we focused on.
So run us through the models that have emerged throughout these conversations. Give us a sense of what they are
Absolutely. And I think some of them you'll find you already know about, and maybe you haven't heard of implementing this way, or you have and it did work or it didn't work, or you may be using them already. The first one was service charges. So in this model, it's adding a flat fee, an additional flat fee for customers. You tell them about it, but it eliminates the variability in pay for your employees, right? Because now they have a set amount that they know they're going to be bringing in per check, per head count. It can be used to help pay for health care if you want to keep it in a pool rather than distributing it, right? If you want to take 3% for example, and add that to the end of the bill and then use that to supplement healthcare costs or whatever the costs are that your employees want. And I would like to just backtrack for 1 second. It's really helpful to include your staff, your bartending staff, front and back of house, in the decision-making processes for this, because if you have buy-in and they say, this is what we want, this is how we want to do this, it just makes everybody happier and the equation runs a lot smoother. The strategy works better. So keep that in mind if and when you decide to implement any of these strategies. The second was revenue sharing. I thought this was a really interesting and unique model. So the employees actually earn a percentage of the profits. I know some restaurants have tried to take tips out of the equation, and this is one model where you can do that. You just raise the rates of the menu items. You let the customers know on the menu that this is the practice, that tipping isn't necessarily required. But again, it eliminates the variability. And then it incentivizes your employees to upsell, right? Because if they are getting a percentage of the profits, then they want to sell more, right? So it's sort of an upward spiral, and it helps everybody win in that equation. The third strategy, which I thought was really interesting, was hourly leadership. And what that connotes is that you basically have your leadership team not salaried, and you pay them an hourly rate that is higher than what you're paying your servers, bartenders. But they can clock out of that hourly rate and clock in as servers and bartenders, and then participate in the tip sharing once they, or the tip pool, or whatever tipping model you have in your restaurant or bar. And so that was interesting because you could actually get three leadership members for the price of one, 3 managers for the price of one. And it allows you to cross-train your employees, right? So you could have your bartender also serve in a managerial capacity for a few hours, clock in and clock out. The other caveat with all of these is you have to make sure that it's actually allowed in your state. So some of them, the states don't allow, and that's sort of the variable you have to consider with whatever strategy you decide to implement. So those are the first 3.
So first 3. Yep. So that takes us to tip pooling.
Yes. So then we have inclusive tip pooling. And again, this allows for cross-training of all your employees. In this model, you can distribute the tips across all of the employees, and that can even translate to front and back of house if there's buy-in with the staff for that. And if that's something that's important to you, it also allows you to raise the base a bit. Transparent menu pricing. So this kind of goes back to that revenue sharing model a little bit, but really what you're doing is just raising the menu prices. It doesn't necessitate eliminating tipping in any capacity, but it allows you to reduce variability again, because with higher menu prices come higher tips, because you typically tip based on the price of the menu item. And again, it allows for other alternative costs to be considered. And then lastly, changing the industry norms. So hopefully we can find ways to at least raise the minimum a little bit, or in your area, if you can get together with groups of bars and or restaurants and say, you know what, if we all raise our prices, then we can afford to pay our employees a little bit more, right? Because it's hard to be the only one in the competitive set who raises your prices, right? So if everybody in the comp set agrees we're gonna raise everything just by $2 or $3, then that will allow us to pay our employees more and more equitably and feel better about this process, then the customers won't balk or like go to a different organization because you've priced them out of it, because all the, when the tide rises, all boats rise with it. So those are our 6 models.
Yeah, that's a lot. Good work running through all of those. No, you did good. Yeah, so obviously, like, pros and cons to every model. Everyone does them a little bit differently. I think the idea is that these are just kind of starting points to, like, kickstart conversations, right? Like, how would that work for your organization? How would you need to adapt it for another, et cetera? So that kind of covers the models. And then from here, Lisa, can you tell us real quick about what you've been doing with the journal, the peer review and publication?
So from this, we have actually written 2 papers. They are in journals for peer review. So what that means is that they don't see who wrote the paper, and I don't know who's reviewing the paper. And so it creates this unbiased perspective of the quality of the content written within it. And these 2 manuscripts will be published very soon, actually. I'm happy to report. So I look forward to sharing that with you. And then once they are, we will have everything posted on the TALES site for you to access if you'd like to read. And Emma's kind enough to summarize them as well. So
Sure. Awesome. Thank you. Tammera, before we jump to the key takeaways, do you have anything you want to add, or that maybe we didn't get into that you think is important to note at this moment before we transition into the last bit?
Sure. So for me, this has been a long journey, and we're finally here to have the journal article published, to have this information we've compiled over the last couple of years to be made public. But the most important thing about it is that I want people to think about is cohesiveness. A lot of bar owners, operators, bartenders operate in silos independently, and if the industry wants that same cohesiveness that doctors, lawyers, teachers, plumbers, engineers have, you have to sort of figure out a way that you can kind of communicate with each other, share information, build a foundation, use these tools. The research that we have supports any data or any questions about what's going on in your industry, what's going on in your field. That is really the tool that we wanted this to be, sort of that support, that pivots movement. So, because you can't implement change without a foundation. And this is that foundation. So,
Yeah.
coalition building is key here. That's really what the industry is lacking to move a positive policy movement, in my opinion. But I think that that's what it's lacking, because it has the advocacy side, like passionate bartenders, servers. Everyone that we interview love the job. Bar owner operators love doing the work that they do. That's not the issue. I mean, of course, we all want labor standard changes, but how do you do that? You have to connect. Coalition building. Use the tools that are out there. The Bar Professional Policy Network is a way to kind of communicate with each other, share information that's going on. If you're in California to Las Vegas to Miami, it doesn't matter. We're all one. So even though we have different jobs, it's the same work.
Lisa, did you want to add anything before we go to Charlotte?
Sure. No, that's okay. I think just one thing is, we want sustainable employment in our industry, right? This is such a dynamic and fun and engaging industry. And if we can knowledge share a little bit more with how we're making our businesses profitable while paying more, if we can share, even if it's among our comp set, because at the end of the day, I think we're all friends, even if we have, our, competitors down the road. At the end of the day, we want this whole industry to survive and thrive. And we want long-standing employees who know our product and are knowledgeable. And so if we can really work together to make this, a more profitable industry across the board, not just for the owners and operators, but also for the employees, I think that is the linchpin. And so hopefully these strategies are the starting point that springboard us into sharing more strategies and more options for us to succeed.
more research too, right? Charlotte, what do you think is like needed next?
No, I was just going to say,
yeah,
absolutely.
yeah.
We definitely need more research here. This is just a start, and it's ours. It belongs to this industry, not restaurants, but bartenders, bar servers. It's for this industry. I just wanted to state it. Just to make the industry sustainable. That's the whole goal. Like we say labor standards, but it's really, we want to keep this as a career, our work. Like, I'll stop here.
No, that's great. And one thing I'd love to pick on is it's not just the wage conversation. We're using the term labor standards. It's about the benefits, the healthcare, and it's really no coincidence, right? Because as bartenders stay in the industry longer, that's having a family, going through life. It's setting up hospitality workers for a lifelong career in an industry that they have every right to be supported in. So this is way more than just the money that they take home. But absolutely, we're committed to further research, as Neil said in the very beginning. You know, from the Tales of the Cocktail Foundation perspective, the conversation, although it's been a lot of work to get us this far, you know, this is about building awareness. This session itself, thank you all for coming, this is part of building awareness so that you start to understand how people can get involved. We have the policy network. All of you can join. I encourage you all to pick up those phones like it's a Coldplay concert and scan the QR code. Am I wrong? Scan that QR code, but get involved and share it with your peers, your colleagues, your friends, the industry at large, because as Tammera said earlier, this is what we need, right? We need to come together, and of course, Tales of the Cocktail is that perfect place where some of us are privileged to physically come together, but the industry at large has that moment to stop and pause and have the difficult conversations and say, okay, what does the industry need? And we don't have the solutions today. We've got 6 great models as suggestions, but this is the start of the conversation now for the broader industry. So, yeah, Tales of the Cocktail Foundation absolutely committed to more research in this area when we can. It's expensive, but that's part of our mission. It's part of why we're here. So thank you all for coming today. Thanks, Emma, for wrapping that up.
Thank you. Thanks all. We do have time for a few questions, depending on how complex they are. So let's get going.
Hello, Michael Limas from Brownsville, Texas. For perspective, Brownsville is the most southern point of Texas. It's on the border of Matamoros, Mexico. And so I've been a financial advisor for 20 years, and I had the wild idea to open a cocktail bar 7 years ago. And now we actually have 4 concepts. But my question is, in my world, we talk capitalization, large cap, mid cap, small cap. What does that mean? Large capitalization are companies like Tesla, Google, Meta, and then they go down from that tier. So hearing the tip credit, what I'm hearing is, I'm a small business owner, right? And so the scale that I have is nothing like a large capitalization company like Landry's or Red Lobster. So hearing this information, which I greatly appreciate, what are your thoughts on organizations like Landry's that have that scalability? They're corporates, they're more public, versus a mom and pop shop like us where we see this tip credit as quantifiably the only way that we can maybe make this work. So how do you see it being tiered differently for folks in different situations, right? Because what Red Lobster's talking about is not what I'm talking about down in South Texas. So what are your thoughts on that? And the last part is there a template or information you could provide us so that we can receive data from our local areas and submit it to you guys to compile kind of like a master list across the country? Because I think 183 bar owners gives perspective and a sample, but we need closer to like 18,000 bar owners talking about this conversation because everybody's dealing with different variables, commodity pricing, things of that nature. So it's a lot of stuff, but really on the tier system of size of organizations has a lot to do with tip credit and so on and so forth. Thank you.
Thank you so much for those questions, and they're really important to consider. I agree. I would love to get 18. I'm going to start with your second question, then go back to your first. But I would love to get 18,000 people to participate in a study. So if everybody wants to share that information with everybody who's at Tales, and then they want to disseminate it out and get more people to participate, that would be incredible. But to get even the 183 participants was a struggle, because it takes time and it takes effort, and we all know time is one thing that we all have a limited amount of every day. But if we can get that, we would absolutely be delighted to put together a chart and, strategies for your area, as well as your size, right? Because that is the other confounding factor, right? It's not one size fits all, and we have to preface it with that, right? If your organizational structure is, 6 people in your organization, and then you talk about like a cheesecake factory that probably has like 90 or 110 or 120 people in their one operation, let alone all the other ones around the country, it's a very different scalable model, right? And so again, the goal was to identify different ways that you could make it work. So maybe looking at an hourly leadership model where, you're not paying anybody's salary. Maybe even the owners aren't drawing a salary, but are clocking in and clocking out with those hourly or managerial rates, right? And that can help to mitigate and offset the costs of labor, right? We recognize this is a very labor-intensive industry, bartending, and labor is the most expensive and variable cost. And then again, finding, qualified and informed and good bartenders who want to stay with us is the other confounding variable. And so how do we do that? And these strategies, again, are the springboard. So hopefully we will be able to identify even more to share with you over time. I hope that answered your question.
Anybody else?
Just a quick question on a clarification on a distinction you made about focusing on bartenders and bar servers. So are you omitting places that serve like more food versus beverage sales in this research, or?
No, we included restaurants. It was
Okay.
a whole gamut. It was over 500 people.
I see.
So they were back of the house, front of the house, everybody, bar servers, bartenders, because they differentiate across the country. So it was different. So we had to be inclusive of all the titles that they held. Bar managers, everything. So
Okay,
it's
thank
all
you.
inclusive.
More questions?
You thought about other countries, case studies, Australia, New Zealand, parts of Europe where minimum wage is far higher and operators still operate very profitable?
That's a good question. Yep.
We did initially, but we really wanted to focus on the U.S. I know in our policy committee meetings, we talked about Australia a lot. I know we mentioned that, and we were going to have someone come in and speak. But this is such a unique perspective in the U.S. It's just hard to compare. It doesn't have that history that the U.S. has by how tipping began. It's a little murky there.
Just to add to that, we also have a very strong tipping culture in the United States that is not present in. There's only 2 other countries that have even relatively close to the same tipping culture as we do, and so it's really good if we look at eliminating tipping, but that wasn't the goal of this specific study. We wanted to see how we could continue to operate with the tipping culture as it currently stands, because we know Danny Myers, he did try to eliminate tipping in his restaurants, and that didn't work because of the culture of this country. And so while operating within our sort of status quo, how can we make things better for everybody across the board?
Did that help, Jacob?
Yeah, Lisa, I had a question for you on one of the models that you put up. So one of the best
Yes.
defenses I've ever heard, again, like Adriana, viewed externally, tipping is slightly strange, but the best defense is it's nothing to do with service, it's a commission on sales. So you had a revenue sharing model on
Yes.
there, so I just had a question about the term revenue. Is that sales sharing, revenue as in total sales?
Yes,
Or
so-
is that about profit?
It was a percentage of profit.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think I heard one over here. Yeah. And then one. So we'll do there and then here, and then that's probably time.
Is there plans in future research to ask the perspective from the consumer as far as what they think about how much they would tip if there is a service charge or if there is increased menu prices, and whether that could change tipping culture in the U.S.? They might tip less because of it.
Actually, we did look into that when we were doing the research. There is a lot of research on the consumer side of it. Like they have conferences on the consumer side and consumption, because that's how they make their profits, through the consumer. So the research was there for that side of it. It just wasn't there for the actual workers and the bartenders and the servers.
So if someone in the future wanted to kind of take this research and then they could integrate that existing research and then go to a legislative body with the whole picture.
Right. NYU is really good. They have a
Don't give me
consumer
this.
conference that they conduct every year in New York, and I went maybe about 2 years ago. Massive conference, and yeah, they definitely have their research down.
Cool. And then right here.
Yeah, this is a quick question. You said something like over 90% of bar owners would like to pay a higher wage or create a better living condition for their, or work conditions for their employees. Did you break down at all the reasons why in that 90%?
The bar owners.
Yeah, bar owners.
Did you get that? I think I was talking about bar, I said 90% the bar employees, bartenders. That may have been the misconnect. Oh, it was up there. It said the bar owners.
When you interviewed the owners,
Yeah.
they wanted to pay more, but there were concerns. What were the concerns?
Right. So the concerns were basically how to make it profitable or sustainable for the business itself, right? Like, I want to pay my employees more. I think that that's a great practice, and ethically and morally, I'm aligned with that. However, without raising my menu prices and pricing myself out of the market, I don't know how to do that, and that was the issue.
I guess my question is, within that 90%, but you said the ethical reasons, but did you look at other reasons why, or rate the different, rank the different
No,
reasons?
we didn't do that, but I can do that in the future. I like that suggestion, and I'll write it down.
Ryan.
Very quickly.
Yeah, go on.
It's really interesting. Like, as you say, most people the majority want this to be better for everyone. There can be this coalition because that's going to help support it as an industry. Is there a point of then taking this back to government? Because not all of this is about landing on the guest or the business to kind of support those things. And policies to help support minimum wage kind of still fall in that space. So is there anything that you can go back to governments to go, look, this is an industry that represents this. We need to be able to provide more sustainability and stability. It's a big part of economies. How are you able to support those businesses in a way that the government supports it as well?
So the question is, what do we have anything that can support going to Congress right now?
Yeah, like
What's
taking
the
all
role
What?
the data and then
Congress
kind of
to step
asking
in
them
and-
to support in kind of a more sustainable manner.
So how it works, to go to Congress, you would need one body,
Yeah.
one body. This industry doesn't technically have that. It would have to be a big brand restaurant to go on behalf, which they already have, which is the NRA. So they represent the restaurants and things like that on those type of matters federally. So who represents this industry federally on matters that involve you and how you have your labor and your labor cost? Not labor cost because that's the owner, but for the worker, there's no one. Like, there's no lobbying arm to this industry. There's no coalition to this industry. There was barely any research. So it's about what the professionals want. If you want that, you have to do the footwork.
So an organization would need to be established, basically, to act as an
Definitely.
intermediary between, like, this as a nonprofit and the government.
I didn't say that.
Is that, yeah. Okay, just checking. Just making sure. I understand.
I'm just saying, I can't say that out loud. But
Yeah. Okay, great. That's it. Yeah, that's it, everybody. Thank you so much for coming out.